All right. So what does it look like to have your multifamily or your investing portfolio function like a Ferrari, like a sports car going super fast? And answer that question. I have a friend of mine, I have Joshua Ferrari here in the house, going to be talking about how to get your business humming, your passive portfolio humming, and get you as an individual humming. So hope I didn't build you up too much there, Joshua, but welcome.
It's funny. I don't think anyone's ever actually introduced me as the guy who can get your portfolio humming. I kind of like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, when you're standing next to like a Geo Metro or some, crappy old car, and then you stand next to a Ferrari. I mean, you hear the engine purring. It's like you just know something different is under the hood there. So when you're around a Ferrari, by the way, I love that you've used Ferrari Capital. It's an awesome way to go, man. But give the listeners just a little bit of a background on yourself. I know you got a big presence on social media. You're doing a ton of stuff in the multifamily space. Just give people a quick intro to who you are.
Yeah. So Josh Ferrari started investing in real estate back in January of 2018. Was 21 years old at the time, had no prior experience in investing or anything for that matter. My dad calls me up one random day, says he's getting ready to retire after 30 years in the Navy. And guess what? He's not ready for retirement. And him and my mom are getting ready to start flipping houses. And I was like, well, that's about the craziest thing I ever heard. I really just laughed at him after he told me that. But that was the simple beginning, the simple conversation that really sparked my interest and catapulted me into the business. So
Yeah.
it was immediately thereafter, my wife and I jumped into wholesaling, tried that for 6 months, didn't close a single deal.
Wow.
Pivoted, realized we didn't want to build a wholesaling empire, and bought a fourplex. Intent was to house hack it. And then ultimately we were just going to keep house hacking until we got where we wanted to be. And that didn't quite pan out. Bought the fourplex about 2.5 years later, lost $60,000. So a lot of headache, heartache, strife, financial stress. And we were newly married too. So you can imagine newlyweds in this horrible financial predicament. And it works often when we got married. It was not the best thing for the marriage. So there was a lot of lessons learned. But we made it through all that. And through that process, one of the main things that we did learn was that we really didn't have clarity on the lifestyle we wanted to live. We wanted financial independence, right? Everybody wants that. But I didn't understand the avenue we had to pursue to get there. And so once we got clarity on the actual lifestyle, like long-term vision, goal we were trying to achieve, we were able to kind of reverse engineer that and make the decision that large scale multi was really what was going to be able to get us there. So we made that decision about 4 years ago. Fast forward 2 years, I found a mentor. I found my two business partners, got very serious and focused on what I wanted to do. And then 23 months ago to date, we closed our first deal. It was a 42 unit here locally in Southern Alabama. And since then, we've closed over 768 units. We've got over $63 million assets under management, raised over $23 million from passive investors, started a podcast that you've had the privilege of being on now that has over 600,000 downloads about 2.5 years ago. I started my own mastermind to teach other investors how to be financially literate and create their own 7 to 9 figure syndication business, get out of their day job. Had about 4 or 5 guys do it so far. And then I was able to officially quit, right? Quit
That's
corporate
great.
America, retire, go full time in my real estate investing business from the passive income generated about 4 or 5 months ago.
Wow. Congrats, man. That's awesome. I didn't realize that you're only 25, man. You carry yourself, you don't look like you're, 30s, 40s, but you carry yourself well, man. So congrats. That's really incredible. I always meet people, I meet consistently. I meet people that are young that have just done amazing things. And I'm like, man, I wish I had gotten the message sooner, right? And I think a lot of listeners are like, man, I wish I had started investing, years ago. And there's that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today, right? And so,
Right.
it's just, you get it when you get it and you do it when you do it. But I really admire kind of what you're doing because you have a successful podcast. You've got obviously this big real estate operation that you've done. And your journey is not, it's unique because you did it very young, but it's not unique in the sense that like people try different things within real estate before they find like, oh, this is it. And you kind of found multifamily. What kind of went into that process for you? Because then a lot of people like I had, 4 or 5 single family houses and I was trying different things. I did an options trading strategy. I lost $70,000 in one day on, which was very defeating, whatever. But I realized like, I'm not an options trader. Okay. I can do a lot of other things, but that's not my gift. Right. But for you, how did you like, obviously your parents kind of helped to get you going in that, but how did you find your way along to larger multifamily? Because honestly, to buy a 42 unit, a lot of people don't think, oh, I bought a duplex, it didn't work. Now I'm going to go buy a 42 unit. So how did you bridge that?
Yeah. So it was a lot of conversations, it was a lot of networking, it was a lot of education. Because as we were trying to get the clarity about what we wanted, that was the first thing we had to do. So I actually read a book called Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold.
I've read the book. It's a great
And
book.
yeah,
Yeah.
right and smack dab in the middle of losing the process of losing 60 grand and going through this just massive headache of a fourplex, quickly realizing that the plan of going from fourplex to fourplex to fourplex wasn't really going to be the answer. It wasn't going to be the solution. It wasn't going to help us live the life we wanted. Matter of fact, I was spending significantly less time with my family than I ever was before having gotten into real estate in the first place, because I was doing most all the work myself. I was working a 50-hour weekday job, barely making ends meet, and then spending another 30, 40 hours a week on the actual house renovations. So after realizing it wasn't sustainable, it wasn't something I wanted to do long term, and then reading that book and just understanding the concept of what clarity can do for you, we actually went on what we now call our annual Vivid Vision retreat, which was, we went to the Tennessee in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, no Wi-Fi, no connection to the outside world kind of thing. Just get out there, and it was before we had a daughter, before we had a dog. It was literally just the two of us. So we went out there and just kind of we just existed and had a lot of time to think and be together and map out what our future actually was going to look like. Because it more often than not, a lot of couples or individuals even don't take the time to really just think about, like, get in a peaceful, quiet position and think about what they want long term. They have ideas, they have bullet points in their head, like, oh, well, I want to be financially free by I'm 30, and I want to do this by this time, and I really like to be out of this day job, and I really like to make $50,000 a month of passive income. And they got these little bullet points goals, but it's not really motivating them to want to actually achieve the goal. And it's not motivating other people to want to help them achieve the goal, because other people don't understand what it is that you want. And a lot of your goals are very beneficial to you and not them. So it doesn't really motivate others. So when I read that book, Vivid Vision, and I found out that my own personal vision can not only motivate me to another level, but it can motivate everyone around me and can help me find business partners. It could help me find a mentor. It could help me do so many things. I was like, well, this is phenomenal. This is something I got to do. So they have a company that they actually are partnered with, the Vivid Vision people, called Conscious Copy. And so I reached out to them because I was never really a copywriter. And I was like, well, maybe they can help me out. Well, they wanted to charge like $5,000 to $6,000 to do it. And I'm like, here I am up to my eyeballs in debt, barely got any cash to my name. I don't got $5,000 to $6,000 to put into something like this. So I really had to just sit down in my quiet time, in my peaceful places, go to the beach, go to the backyard, walk around, have a notebook and pencil, pen in hand, get away from the phone, get away from the notifications, and really just think about what it is that we wanted. Same thing we did in the mountains. So once we got the clarity and figured that out, and I was actually able to draft the vision itself, it's sitting here in front of me now. And once we got that was when I realized we were going to have to do something on a larger scale. And as we were going through the process of figuring out what we wanted to do, I had already read Joe Ferris's big red book, the best ever, apartment syndication advice or something. And I had seen and heard about syndication a handful of times. And I was intrigued about the concept, but I just didn't know a lot about it. But I was like, I don't care that I don't know a lot about it. I didn't know a lot about wholesaling before I got started. I didn't know a lot about this fourplex before we got started. And granted, we're losing money here, but you're not always going to know everything. You just got to kind of take the leap of faith. So took the leap of faith, made that our vision, made that our goal, made that what we wanted to do. And then once I got really serious about it, it wasn't but like a month later that I found my mentor, who actually ended up being an organic mentor, not one I had to pay for, just strictly through networking. And the rest is history.
Yeah, it's amazing how I love the process and the order that happened, because you took time to get really clear on what it is you wanted. And that book, Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold, it's a great book. I went away to a mountain for a couple of days and just like, what do I want? What do I want to create? What does this look like? Whatever. And super helpful, because you write it down, and the idea as a family member, as a spouse, as a leader, as whoever in your company, like, you have an idea where you want to go, but nobody else knows what's in your mind. And you may think it's super clear, but it's not. And so just getting really clear on what you want is really, really important. I think for passive investors too, it's something that, we got to get clear on. Do we want to, is the goal to leave my job? Is the goal to replace my income with passive income, or to replace living expenses with, passive income? And all those things are possible, but you got to get clear on what you want first. And so once you get clear, it gives you the vision to be able to do it. So that's awesome. So you did it, and basically everything now has happened. You quit your great job, and you were a great, aircraft mechanic. You won awards in that, and did all kinds of stuff. And now you're doing what I do, and you do podcasts and travel and go to events and all kinds of stuff, and are, a dad and all that. So what has there been anything that surprised you about the journey, that kind of looking back over the last few years of like, oh man, like I didn't know that this would be this hard or this easy, or I wish I had done this? Or is there something like about that you'd say, I just wish I had known that, or wish I had tried that? Or is there a common thing that you see among investors that's like, oh, I wish I could just shake them and show them this?
Yeah, there's a lot, honestly. There's a lot of things that I would like to think that I'd like to do over again, specifically with the fourplex, losing so much money, starting off in the business in such a hole. Instead of starting at least from ground zero, where most people start, and being able to grow, we started in the negatives. And so it was more difficult. And so sometimes I think back and I'm like, man, should we have just gone big? Should we have just done like the first deal we ever did? Should just have been the 42 unit or 50 unit or 100 unit? Because a lot of people think that they need to start small, and they need to start with single family and eventually grow and do larger stuff. And that's great for some people. Maybe that's just the way that your mind was wired, and maybe that's what makes you feel comfortable, and that's okay. Nothing against that, but it's not because it's impossible to do it the other way. Like some people convince themselves that it's impossible to get started in the big stuff, so they have to do the small stuff, but they really want to do the big stuff long-term anyway. And you can get in immediately and do a large deal. I mean, I was negative $60,000 in the hole and closed a 42 unit, made almost 200 grand in profit on it in a 16-month time frame, having none of my own money into the deal. So it's definitely possible. It's just a matter of meeting the right people, knowing the right things, knowing how to execute. Getting the education is another big thing. I think another big lesson I learned with the fourplex was that we tried to do it all by ourselves. I thought that because it was a small deal, and there wasn't a lot of pie to go around, that I needed to have 100% in order for it to make financial sense. And couldn't have been further from the truth, because now, sure, I got 100% of the air quote reward if everything turned out, but I also had 100% of the risk, which really screwed me, because there was a lot of things that went wrong with that deal, and I had to absorb all of that. And it was detrimental to our financial health. But I didn't let that stop me, right? Didn't let it just get me down and be like, well, first deal, that's everyone's worst case scenario, right? When you're getting started in investing, when you're thinking about investing in real estate, mailbox money, it all sounds great. But some people are just so scared, so fearful of losing money on their first deal. Yeah. They're like, I'm just not going to do it in the first place. And that's exactly what happened to me. Lost money on the first deal. So you'd think it would be defeating and I would be quitting. But instead, I felt like it was more motivational, because I had to now dig myself out of the even deeper. There's got to be gold down here somewhere, right? I got to keep digging. I'll find it eventually. All these other people will find it. Honestly, my main motivation was that I was seeing all these other people around me in the business of similar background to me seeing success. And I was like, if they can do it, I can freaking do it. They're not I'm not calling them idiots, but it's not like they're much smarter than me. They're not, They don't know this thing, or they're not created this weird, whatever system that isn't repeatable. If 90% of the world's millionaires are doing so through real estate, then that's a lot of people that have found success in this business. There's got to be something that I'm not doing right that I need to tweak, or someone that I need to bring in to help me, which was ultimately what I came to the conclusion of. So the first deal we did, trying to do it all by myself, then making the decision I wanted to get larger. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start bringing other people's cash into this. I can't screw up. I can't mess up. I need to know more. So actually getting a mentor and finding someone who could help guide me through the process, and who had done it before, I think was massively beneficial and helped me really get into the business more effectively, as opposed to getting into it the same way I did with the fourplex of just dilly-dallying around and losing more money.
Yeah, no, I agree. You shared a lot of great things there. I look at a business loss. There's a story that I have where I was in a room with about 50 people, and and the speaker was at a real estate meetup, and he's like, "How many of you lost more than $50,000 in a single real estate deal?" And like 5 or 10 hands go up. And it's like, "How many lost more than $100,000?" And some hands are still up. And he goes like, "How many lost $500,000 in a deal?" And there's like a few hands up. And he said, "How many lost more than $1 million in one deal?" And it was him and the person who was was leading the group. And I knew his high net worth, and it was the two of them. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, wow." So I realized like losses themselves they can be educational. And if you really learn from it, when I lost $70,000 in one day from an options trading strategy that I didn't understand, when my net worth was like 200,000, that was really painful, right? It was really hard. It was hard to, I felt like such a failure, but I learned so much from that. I learned that, okay, this is not the right investment for me, right? I learned I'm really good at other things. I'm really good at working with people. I'm really good at other things like real estate where it doesn't involve like a specific pull this lever when this thing happens and whatever, but I learned, right? So it's all education. So if you don't waste it, and then you talked about another thing is really the power of mentors. And I think whether somebody's active or they're passive, if they're interested in, being able to learn and grow, it really expands what they're able to do. So you've done all that stuff. You mentioned as well, I just want to shift a little bit, but you were talking a little bit about, scaling up, right? So going from even a single or duplex up to 40 units. I think there's kind of a sweet spot when you get to about 60 or 80 units, because then you have more on-site people. It actually gets to be less work, and people have trouble understanding how can it be less work. A duplex for sure has to be easier than like 100 units, right? But would you say it's easier, or would you say it's harder to do a smaller deal than one that's a little bit larger?
The larger deals are by and far the easier ones to do. The fourplex that I had, again, with the day job, about 80 to 100-hour work weeks, trying to do all the
Wow.
work and manage now, granted, we were in the thick of it doing the renovations. If you've got a fourplex and there's no renovations to do, then maybe you're not spending that much time. But if you're managing it yourself, if there are any renovations, or if you're like own maintenance guy, which I was, then for me, I was spending 80 to 100 hours a week doing the fourplex. Transition to the multifamily side of the house, and I'm spending maybe 20 hours a week doing, full time now, doing like all of the investing side of the house. Now I could be spending more, and more often than not I am, just because I enjoy it. But it's not a necessity. It's like networking and going to events that takes up a lot of time, but it's stuff that I enjoy doing that I know is ultimately going to help me scale and grow in the long term. But actual stuff that like has to get done to move the needle to keep the business going, 20 hours a week or less. It's really not that much effort required to keep the properties running. And for what you're saying from the size perspective, it's because we do have the on-site property management. We're not managing in-house from a property management perspective. We are asset managing in-house, but at the end of the day, your property managers are your day-to-day, running
Right.
all the primary operations, and us as the asset managers are just kind of helping them and making sure we're all on the same track to satisfy whatever our business plan or our goals are that we set forth with our investors.
Yeah.
But they're really the ones moving the needle daily. So for us, it's like, and now we've got a property that I go to once a week for like an hour and a half a week to help move the needle there. But even then, it's an hour and a half a week. Like, it's just, there's significantly less time that I spend on the larger stuff than I did with the smaller stuff. And it's because there is the scalability. There is the economies of scale. There is the teams and the systems and the different processes you can set in place. Whereas with a fourplex, things get really expensive, because if you did hire a property manager, they're going to charge you probably 10%, or maybe it's 12% now. I don't know. I'm not in the single family space. Maybe it's 12% annually, or whatever the rents are that they're going to want to take from you. And that's probably like all your profit, maybe. I don't know. If you're only getting a couple $100 a month, they could just suck up all your profit. And that's the cost of them doing all the work instead of you doing the work. And now you're not even making money.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Granted,
makes sense.
you're growing with inflation or with appreciation, but to each their
Yeah.
own.
So the title of this we're talking about is operating your property like a Ferrari. So what are some things that you found? Obviously, property management is very helpful. Are there any specific practices that you do as kind of managing the manager, or keeping an eye on things that you look for, or things that kind of have been a help to you as you've scaled up? That's like, oh, here's something that's actually kind of helpful when it comes to managing things better.
Oh, that's a good question. As far as management goes, with this one property we've been struggling with in particular, I, again, have been visiting now weekly for about an hour, hour and a half per week. And I'm meeting with, this is a fairly larger property management company. So this isn't a company that's got only a couple hundred units under contract or that they're managing. And we're kind of scaling with them because we've done that before. And that was a massive mistake. We're not going to do that again. This company is a much more reputable. They've been around for 30 years. They have tens of thousands of units under management within the area. So, of course, they've got regional managers and they've got the whole shebang, the whole setup. So I not only am meeting with the property manager, our actual on-site property manager, I'm also meeting with the leasing agent, making sure the leasing agent is there. Also making sure that our maintenance manager is there. They've got a manager that on like the corporate level that manages all of their maintenance. Also making sure that the CEO is there, basically the head of the actual program. And then the regional manager is there as well. So I've got all of the big head honchos, and then I've got our little tiny maintenance people and leasing agent and property manager. I try to get everyone that's actually on site in the meeting that's critical to the day in and day out operations. And then I try to get the bigger people in as well, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because there's lack of communication is typically the biggest pain point that we found in an asset from an asset management perspective, where you tell your on-site management one thing and they just go and they do something else, or they say something got lost in translation. They didn't know they were supposed to do this, and this happened, and they didn't know they were supposed to. And it's like, it's always something that they didn't know, or someone did something that they weren't supposed to. And it's always small stuff, but the small stuff leads to big stuff real quick. And that happened with this particular deal. You know, every time you buy a deal, you plan for worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. This is quite literally the worst case is what happened with this.
Well, now you're gonna have to tell us what happened. Why don't you give us the short version here?
So the short version of what happened is we had to fire 2 property managers already, which was partially our fault. Growing pains of figuring out what the best property management company was to actually onboard, which I told you guys, the first property management company we hired only had a couple hundred units, and this property was 148 units. And so we were a large portion of what they owned, and we thought that was going to be a good thing, that they were going to be able to focus a lot of efforts on what our property was.
Too much for them.
But it was entirely too much growth and entirely too short of a time frame for them. They couldn't handle it, and they actually made the property worse than it was when we first bought it. So we're like, all right, they got to be fired. So we fired them, hired the next company, who was just a little bit bigger. You know, they had about 1,000 units or so that they were managing in the area. And we're like, okay, you know, they have a little bit more comprehension, understanding. They've done this a couple of times. They're going to be able to have the ability to do so. But they weren't integrated with like regional managers and everything else. We had all just our on-site staff, and then their 2 like CEOs that owned the company. And so the CEOs were helping us out a lot. They were basically doing asset management work, being on site a lot, but it still wasn't enough. They made things just slightly better, but not nearly as as better as they needed to be, as quickly as they needed to be. So we've already gone through 2 transitions, and I'm sure you know how long a transition takes with a property management company. Wow. So now we've got to go through the 3rd transition with a company that's much, much, much larger, that, like I said, now has tens of thousands of units under management and has been around for over 30 years. So once we brought them on, things have started to turn around very quickly. But through the process of the first 2 property managers, one of our properties, one of the buildings, 16 units in the building, all the plumbing just decided to explode on itself. Not from lack of like construction acumen,
just bad timing. Just happened all of a sudden.
It was the plumbing, like materials itself, because everywhere that it burst in like long runs of pipe.
Oh man,
it wasn't like an elbow that wasn't correctly attached or a fitting that wasn't attached correctly. It was literally just the material of the plumbing all exploded on itself at once in this one building. So the whole building flooded, and the whole building was occupied naturally, all 16 units. So then we had to evict all 16 units because it's not a livable condition anymore. And we got to get in there and mitigate the water problem, and they can't live with mold, and there's water dripping down on people on the lower floor, and whole situation. So they had to be evicted. Well, then they sued us for a wrongful eviction. Didn't feel like they deserved to be evicted, which I didn't feel like they did either. You didn't deserve it. It's just, it is what it is. We got to get in there and fix this.
Yeah. Right.
Of course, we fought that, but that was just another headache, more legal costs and stuff we had to deal with. Meanwhile, we're dealing with the insurance claim. And if you know anything about insurance claims and policies and premiums, they have been a massive headache, specifically along coastal areas, but just all throughout the region, really. Because just this last hurricane that happened, Hurricane Ian, cost just one insurance provider, just one provider. Now, they were a large provider, but they're just one. Cost them, I think, like $28 billion in losses they lost just from one hurricane.
Yeah.
And that didn't even hit our region. We're in Alabama. That was in Southern Florida. Right. But obviously it hits the company who's providing in the coastal areas. So premiums themselves, naturally our insurance provider, after going through this claim, nullified our coverage. They said, we're canceling your policy. So then we had to get another policy, but there was only 3 providers at the time, and the whole
way more expensive.
Yeah, and it was 2.5 times what we were already paying.
Yeah, right.
So now we're getting slapped with that. Meanwhile, we had the 3 transitions and this property that's now vacant, and we've got this massive issue with these other properties because they were worse off. The first property manager we had non-renewed 32 tenants at one time and thought that was a good idea. And so we've been battling getting that reoccupied for the last 2 property managers that we've had.
Wait, they didn't allow people to renew when they wanted to renew? They did non-renewals on that, basically.
They did non-renewals on 32 tenants at one time. Absolutely ridiculous. Way too much turnover sometimes.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, all 92 of the 148 units had aluminum wiring so we were in the process of transitioning them to copper because we wanted cheaper insurance. You can imagine what it would be if we didn't do that. So we had all that CapEx expense, and the actual turnovers of that happening, like getting our property managers to manage people moving out and getting things in there. It's pretty heavy turn, taking all the sheetrock out, redoing all the wiring, get everything put back together. Well, they just couldn't handle it. And the 32 units that they non-renewed, they thought would also be a good idea to go in all 32 units at once and tear all the sheetrock out and redo all the wiring at the same time. And I'm like, this is just ludicrous. Who would do this? And so it was just headache after problem. And then dealing with the insurance claim in and of itself, actually getting the payout for the damages took about 5 months just to get the money. So we were using a lot of our own money to pay for the renovations and the construction.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of labor shortages. So that's been also causing problems. And then material prices are continuously increasing. So that was another problem we were running into.
Lots of challenges. We could go on for a long time, man. I really appreciate the story. Man, I just want to really honor you for the, I know this is like halfway through the story, right? You got plenty more to go, but for the sake of time, we gotta wrap this up, and we gotta have you back for a part 2, and you can just continue that story because it goes on and on. But just shows the challenges of operating properties and doing well. I mean, if you raise capital for a deal, that's like 20 or 30% of the work, and then the rest is all just actually doing the work itself. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. Sometimes things can compound, and one thing leads to another, as your story shares. Well, I appreciate you, man, sharing all that you shared on this show. You also are adding so much to the investor community, both. And I think actually there's a great input for people that maybe have kids that are like, they're trying to get them started in real estate or getting them going on. I think you're somebody that people should follow for that reason too, of, hey, how can I get my kids or my nephews or even if I'm young, how do I get started in it? But you have the Creative Capital podcast, which I've been on as a guest. A lot of fun, great show. And you also have the Ultimate Guide to Investing in Multifamily Syndications, which is an ebook. Why don't you talk about how people can reach out to you, Josh?
You can just go to our website at ferraricapital.com, and there's a whole bunch of different contact forms there. You can check out, I don't currently blog or do newsletters anymore, but all the old blogs and newsletters we ever done are on there. And then the podcast is on there as well. Best way to follow the podcast is actually go to iTunes or Spotify or something like that to get the most up-to-date episodes. But the podcast is also on the website. And then all of my social media links are at the bottom of the website as well, which is another great way. Following me specifically on LinkedIn and Facebook are the 2 platforms I'm most active on.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing how to drive your real estate property like a Ferrari.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, so that was a good story, especially at the end. He started talking about the issues in a property. He still shared that to this point, they have not missed their 10% preferred return on that deal, which I thought was really impressive. And that's a sign of a good operator, is that they'll be honest with things that have not gone well. So, in general, I haven't invested in any of his deals, but he talked about all the challenges of operating a deal well. And to operate a deal well, nothing ever is like completely a science. Obviously, if you have prior track record in that particular market, like we've got 1,500 units in Jacksonville. That's what really allows us to know that we have certainty going into a new area with the same property manager. It's a similar area. It's the same construction crew. We know we can kind of get these rents. It's much less risk than like, oh, hey, I'm a new operator and I'm in a new market and it's with a new property manager to that market. And again, there's just much more, there's many more variables, but regardless, you're going to have challenges and stuff. Like he's like, yeah, all the piping just kind of exploded at the same time. Now, could have been a water pressure issue. We don't know what the reason for that was, but for whatever reason it happened. And all these tenants, I mean, you can imagine dealing with that as a property manager. Sorry, you guys all have to move out because there's water flooding all your units. Like that's not a good situation, but that's when you are an operator in multifamily or any investment, you have to, you take that on as, hey, I'm responsible for this investment. I'm responsible for people's capital, and it's a big deal. So if you haven't joined our investment club, we've got stuff in the multifamily space. I still think multifamily is an amazing deal right now. I've got some videos on YouTube I did about why I think this is a great time. And secondly, we have an ATM machine fund that we do a couple times a year. We've got some stuff that's in the oil and gas space. We've got some other things that we're working on. So we're always working on new things. And really, it's not about necessarily what the investment is. It's what it does for you. What are the tax benefits? What are the returns? What are the risks? What are the upsides? Does it have a potential to double or go up 100x? Or what are the things that are there? So that's what we try to do on the Mailbox Money Show, is really help you make better investment decisions. Really appreciate each of you. If you want to reach out to me, you can shoot me an email or get a hold of me on social media. My email is bronson@bronsonequity.com. Please write and leave a review for this podcast on iTunes. It helps us to get even better speakers, and love doing this show. But thanks for taking the time to educate yourself. We get to do this together. It's awesome. We would have no Mailbox Investor Nation like we do here without each of you. So look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Mailbox Money.
You've been listening to the Mailbox Money Podcast. For more free resources, articles, and videos, go to bronsonequity.com. There you can download your copy of the special report, The Single Best Investment Strategy During and After a Pandemic. None of the information shared here is an offer to buy a specific investment, and this is for educational purposes only. Consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals and use your own common sense before making any investment decisions. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time for more Mailbox Money.